Good morning and welcome to the Leadership in Insurance podcast. I'm your host, Alex Bond, and I'm very lucky today to be joined by David, who is CEO and founder of MonarkHQ. David, good morning. Well, it's not morning, my morning. Is it your morning? Or
Yeah, for another 45 minutes here. It's still my morning as well. Yeah.
Yeah, but we have to say morning because we're always releasing on the morning when we put the podcast out. So we're morning in everyone's ears. So look, thank you very much for being a guest on the podcast. We had a really good conversation when we first spoke, and I think we share a lot of the same stories in different parallel industries as we were just gassing away there before we pressed record. So, but just so everyone at home can get to know you a little bit better. Would you mind introducing yourself and obviously the Monark business as well?
Sure. Yeah. My name is Dave Bryant. I've been primarily in the insurance and tech sales side of things for the last 15 years. And in a bunch of those different roles, kind of realized a lot of the inefficiencies that weren't being solved by new tech startups. There's a lot of great new InsurTech platforms out there. And they helped me move a lot of the business and sales operations forward dramatically. And but there were still a couple areas on the front end of the sales process that I noticed were still just not catching up to other industries, and were just painfully slow. And eventually, you kind of get to a point in time where, if you're of a founder mindset and you have a problem and you realize you might not be the only one with the problem, you can either keep complaining about it, or you can grab a buddy and pull them into a multi-year venture to try to solve it. And that's basically how we started with MonarkHQ. Is we wanted to really streamline a lot of the legacy quoting systems that have been involved in the employee benefits insurance space that were created 15, 20 years ago. And to put it politely, they show their age, and they every couple of years they put a new UI on top of the old existing UX experience on everything, and we just thought that was time to change the way that was being handled. So the first phase of our product we've launched in California, which is a small group under 100 employee live quoting for medical plans. Fairly straightforward product on that side, but it was really a proof of concept to show that we could build a quoting engine and that we could start tracking some of the data analytics that we think are going to be really, really valuable for brokers, employers, and insurance carriers for benchmarking tools down the road. And then now we're currently in development on the second phase of the product, which we are building out the first ever live auction reverse bidding platform for insurance. Wow. With live benchmarking and analytics tools for all three sides of that marketplace. So rather than just being a one size shelf rated product and quoting engine for brokers, we actually want to create that dynamic experience. So we've seen that happen on the finance side in the industry 20 years ago. And there was really nothing there on the insurance side that provided that same kind of experience. And we just thought that was long overdue. So we want to shrink that quoting, that proposal, quoting, analysis, and implementation phase. Right now, you could argue that takes about 120 days in a cycle. We believe we can get that down to under an hour. So we beta test. I also own a employee benefits brokerage. We beta tested a bunch of this stuff on our own staff, and we cut 8 hours of spreadsheeting down to 20 minutes. So it's already showing great returns on investment, even just for my own brokerage team. So we're having those conversations now with external brokerages to introduce them to the Monark platform and show them, how we can improve their workflows and operational efficiency there on the front end of the sales process.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, it's always a great thing when it's kind of a real world problem that you stumble across and then set out to solve it. And I think that what's interesting about the InsurTech space is now we're seeing a lot of founders from the industry that have experience in the industry, and they're solving those kind of real world problems. Because I think that's, I don't know what phase we're in of the InsurTech revolution, as it were, but someone said we're in kind of 3.0 version. And I think a lot of those early entrants were external people coming into the industry and saying, oh, it's all broken, and that they were just essentially all they wanted was funky looking websites and different. It was alternative distribution, right? It was looking at different distribution models. Now we're kind of, I think we're just reaching that level of maturity where we've got kind of people saying, look, this is a real problem. I'm from the industry. this needs updating, and those are where some of the really exciting businesses for me are happening at the moment. And talking about other InsurTech businesses, you were, that's how we connected. You were nominated in the back of the InsurTech 100. I wanted to ask you, at this kind of stage of the kind of the evolution of the business, the start of the business, how impactful are those kind of nominations or awards? Do you see anything tangible from those things? I never think to ask, but
yeah, I think they add a certain level of credibility. So anytime there's an outside party that's like, hey, we think this is, at the very basic level, they could just simply say, we think this is cool, right? You get named to one of those top 10 best products from working from home, and it goes, up on BuzzFeed or something like that, and people start paying attention. Anytime you can leverage anything where it's outside validation for your product and service, it just gets you one step closer to that next conversation of additional validation and experience. And the more and more of that you stack up, the easier it is to provide that credibility to potential clients and vendors that could be coming onto your system. So we've been leveraging that even with conversations with, we're starting to engage with a bunch of venture capitalists, and I think that accolade saying like, hey, someone else, we know you've only got 30 seconds to make a decision as to whether or not you want to have a conversation with us, but here's a couple bullet points as to why we think you should jump on the phone with us for 15 minutes and get to know us a little bit better. And having even something that says someone else has done this with us before and they think we're cool means that we're just that much closer to that better conversation with the next person down the line who maybe hadn't heard of us previously. So that's kind of the way that I look at these, is that each one of these accolades is really a stepping stone to the next bigger, next piece of the business down the road. So it all just adds up and creates a compounding effect around the business. For example, like having that and then now having this conversation with you, again, it continues to expand the network and the audience we're able to reach and share what we're working on.
Yeah, well, I hope it is, because we had a bit of a nice win. Look, of course we do the podcast because it's a really good way for us to keep in as a business for FinPro, a recruitment business. How do we have good quality conversations with people without them thinking we're trying to constantly just sell them and pitch them business? Sure. This is a really good way to do that, and that's why we do it, and that's why we enjoy doing it. But obviously the kind of network effect of it is interesting because we get to know lots of people, and that means actually we are more effective at our role. But we had a lovely win quite recently where we had a very early stage business that had come on, and they were on, and we just got a lovely email from the other days just saying that off the back of that they'd had loads of interest from incubation labs and investors, and so I wouldn't say it's by design, but we'd love that to be part of it. But I think all of these things, what I like about insurance, and I wanted to talk about your journey into insurance in a bit more detail later on, was that I think it's a very supportive industry. I think it's a very well networked industry. If you speak to someone who works in the insurance sector in LA, you can bet your bottom dollar they know a hell of a lot of people in LA that work in the insurance industry, and then by proxy, lots of people across the sort of business. And I do think that's quite unique. I think there are lots of businesses where you get that. In recruitment, I'm quite friendly with a lot of my closest competitors because I think it's healthy. But I do think insurance is fairly unique in that instance.
It was something I tried to fight for years. I was always, minorly annoyed that 98% of my LinkedIn contacts were all insurance people, and I was like, I want some outside influences. I want some marketing people, some true tech product, and just to expand the horizons and get additional thoughts on different things that you might not be looking at on a daily basis. And no matter how hard I tried, I just, for every one person I would add in a different industry, I would add 5 more in insurance. And it was just so at a certain point, it's like you get a request from an insurance individual and you find out you've got 400 common connections, and you're like, okay, this is what it is. Everyone here knows each other. So
yeah, it's nice. It's rewarding. Well, I wanted to talk about that. So look, you have a very successful benefits brokerage business. You're running that. We were talking about how hard that was to get. We were talking about the 24-hour working days at the start of it. We were hearing some of those nightmares, and we were swapping war stories before this. But in the midst of all that, why was the right time for you to kind of start Monark?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple things. You look at any great company, and you can say, oh, the founder was a visionary or whatever, and you look at Apple or Amazon, whatever the case is. But there's a lot of study that goes into those businesses to say also that founder had the right amount of experience. They were at the right point in their career. They were in the right market. The timing in the macro ecosystem was the right moment in time. A lot of times there was a similar business that tried to do what they were doing 10 years earlier and failed, right? And one of the things that I looked at with Monark is a lot of this idea has always been there, but there wasn't the connectivity. There wasn't a willingness or an ability for what we wanted to do to connect to the carrier's data systems, especially down market in the under 100 employee space. Like, just forget it. Those conversations just went dead, every time we tried to bring them up. So a little bit of it was kind of just waiting, right? A great comment I once heard on Netflix was, if you remember, they started out as a DVD mail order service. And they always knew they wanted to do it online, but the average household didn't have enough bandwidth to support streaming movies, right? And so they basically created a different model first, and then basically had to wait for the market to catch up. And one of the things that we've looked at with Monark is we feel the market is there. We've seen other InsurTech platforms come in to solve benefits administration and employee enrollment and engagement. And you've got AI bots that help with decision-making processes of employees going through trying to figure out which medical plan to sign up for. And so there's been a lot of innovation there. And the industry is really, really robust on that experience side of things once plans have been chosen. And we just felt that while there were a couple really promising options on the front end, we thought we had a unique business model that could really kind of turn that front end of the quoting and proposal and analytics side of it kind of on its head. And we felt the rest of the industry was in a place to actually accept that. The more conversations we had, the more they wanted that. I previously ran an employee benefits division for ZipRecruiter that was fairly short-lived because they basically ran into these same problems, and they said, look, this is crazy. This should not take 90 days to onboard a client, right? Because in software sales, someone says, yes, I want your service. They put in their credit card and they hit go, and their service is live and you have their payment, right? And in insurance, someone says, yes, let's do this. And you have to wait 90 to 120 days to get them fully implemented. Like, it was just like, this is insane. And then all the regulatory framework and everything else around it. So the regulatory issues are what they are, and they're there for protections and everything like that. So you just got to accept that. But what we really saw was an evolution of willingness to try to inside the industry to be much more open to, hey, this sounds like a great idea. How can we support this? And so a lot of the conversations we were having with insurance carriers and other vendors said, we like it. What do you need from us to help you? Right. And hearing that dynamic change said, okay, this is go time. We've recognized there's a need. We chat with a lot of brokers before, sometimes I have a tendency to say, well, this would solve my problem. Let's just go and spend a lot of money and build it. And that's not a great business model when you have one customer and that customer is yourself. That's a good way to lose money very quickly. So we wanted to make sure that there was outside desire for it on the broker side. We wanted to make sure that there was a willingness with insurance carriers to on board with us as well, and to help support that ecosystem. And that was kind of what we started seeing. And Larry was on a 4-hour road trip with my now co-founder heading skiing. And he heard me for about 3 hours complaining and bitching about the problem. And he's a fairly high level senior director of engineering at a well-known company. And he said, we can solve that. Why don't we just get to work? And I'm like, yeah. Now's the time. Let's do it. And so we given we snowboard and I snowboard, he skis. We called that our first official board meeting. So getting out on the boards to ride, and kind of we spent the whole weekend hashing out the business model.
Yeah, I love that. You have to find people that way. Client, it's funny. I was having a conversation with a really senior product guy that I know, super smart guy, and I was basically moaning about I was moaning about the functionality of LinkedIn from a back end perspective because it's a fairly expensive SaaS product when you use it from a recruitment standpoint, and the functionality of it's not brilliant. And I was kind of going over it, and basically I had the sort of proposition, and he was like, we could build that, and here's how, and he solved it in about 10 minutes. He went, yeah, that's exactly how it should work. And I'm going to skip forward. Actually, there was a question I was going to ask you later, but you are a non-technical founder running a tech-led business. What challenges has that kind of caused you, and how do you kind of resolve those?
Yes, so I think having a technical co-founder, Steven's been fantastic on that side. So to start with, his his technical prowess is not in the insurance space at all. So coming in from an outside perspective and being able to see how world-class engineering problems are solved, and then looking at the insurance problems, and he's just kind of, half the time he's scratching his head and be like, why do they do it that way? Wouldn't it be better to do it this way? And I'm like, yeah, that does sound better. He's like, okay, I'm going to do it my way. I'm like, great, right? So part of the advantage there is that I'm not necessarily dreaming up like, I have an idea of what the end goal should be, and I know what the current situation is, but having someone who doesn't come from the industry to help roadmap out the stuff in between, it has been hugely advantageous. So what I'm really trying to bring here is a deep understanding of the problem, of the way it currently works, and of the partners we need to bring on board to make all these pieces work, and then working with someone extremely technical to help build the product and engineering team to solve for those pieces. And a lot of times the stuff that he's pushing out, we're actually pushing a update over the weekend here, and I got a sneak peek of kind of the newer version of it yesterday, and I was like, that was actually better than I envisioned in my head. So there's a lot of features where I was like, hey, it'd be cool if we could do this. And then he just took it to a whole nother level. And I'm like, I didn't even know you could do that, but that's amazing. So so I think that has really been helpful in this situation. I do see a lot of non-technical co-founders often struggle, especially early on, until you can bring in a true technical partner. It's one thing to hire outside engineering and contract work and stuff like that. But if you don't have someone embedded and invested in the business journey with you on a technical side, I can see that being an extremely difficult path to go all on your own. So, so we basically have made a decision to, for the most part, we divide and conquer, and we overlap about 15% in the middle. So I'm handling business operations, legal, finance, sales, marketing, that side of the house, and then having him handle technical side, but having 4 times a week, in-depth touch points there to kind of go over everything. Well, we've already been on this call. I've seen 4 Jira tickets already being updated on product roadmap pieces. I can see our engineer in the Ukraine is still plugging away here, and Steven's going and updating notes on things. So definitely in the loop, and having that regular touch point cadence to make sure that we're on the right track, we're prioritizing the right features. It gets really easy being non-technical to suddenly say, hey, we should do this, and you throw something out there and you don't realize, that would be cool, but that's a 4-month, item, right? Whereas something else that would make a meaningful impact could take, 2 or 3 hours to knock out, right? So we constantly, almost on a weekly basis, are going through a priority matrix of effort versus reward for every single feature that we're building out. We're also trying not to get too distracted. It's a combination of balancing, long-term vision for where the product will end with also short-term, what can we do now to get the early win, right? And so we try to kind of balance a little bit of both of those pieces there. We've got some things we're working on that no one has asked us for because it doesn't exist and no one knows it could exist, but we think it's going to be a game changer. And then we've got a bunch of other things that everyone we demo to says, yeah, that's great, but it'd be really cool if it could do this. And we're trying to say, like, okay, do they really need that? Or if they can just wait an extra 6 months, we'll have this like whole new crazy thing that they don't even know we could do. And that'll be 10 times better than what they asked for. Like, how much time do we spend on what people are asking us for now versus what we think we should build for them later? And that's where it can get a little tricky, but having a technical co-founder has definitely helped kind of break down, and it's helped me understand, hey, the stuff you're asking for, this is how long these pieces are going to take. Based on that information, what do you want to prioritize? And I think that's really been key to kind of managing the workflow there. So
and it's to your point as well. It's excuse me. It seems to be the benefit as well of someone from not within the industry is that, if you ask anyone within the insurance industry, oh, how would we make this process better, XYZ process better, it's going to be a variation on a theme. It's going to be, it's not going to sort of take enough steps back to go, well, why do you do that in the first place? You could do this. And I think one thing that we've been poor at generally, and something that I see in my role as a senior recruitment professional, is that we're not good at pulling people in from other industries when there are specifically within tech. How much does someone need to know about insurance, really? If they're a sort of a tech leader, they can pull that talent within the business. If you're an insurance company or insurance brokerage, there's enough there's enough insurance knowledge within the building. But you don't know the limitations of tech. So yeah, it's really interesting to see you have that set up from the start, just because that's your kind of that's what your technical co-founder does with you. So you're running a marketplace solution. One of the things that I'm not cynical about, I just a bit skeptical about, they require transparency to work. And I really wanted to know, have you met any resistance with regards to that transparency? The smile that some people can't see. If you're listening to this podcast, there's been a very big smile on David's face. So I presume you have met some resistance for that sort of stuff.
Yeah. So I mean, to start with, the first one of the first hurdles we were jumping through was I reached out to every single medical carrier in the state of California and said, I'd like copies of all of your filed plans and your rate tables. And to start with, just the hoops I had to jump through just to get my hands on that was pretty unbelievable. I thought, they would just say, sure, here, right? Because it's all been filed with the Department of Insurance. There's nothing that should necessarily be secretive about it. But, I had to get involved with their compliance officers and, all these kinds of things. And I was like, this is just a rate table. Like, why is there all of this secrecy around it?
Yeah.
And, and there's one carrier in particular that we've worked with on my brokerage side for years, and they are just freakishly good at physician disability products. If you bring them a law firm and you say, hey, we want to quote them disability, they say, yeah, we're probably not the right fit, and they walk away, right? You bring them a medical group and they blow everyone else out of the water 9 times out of 10, right? And they know what they're good at. They don't deviate from that. And they say, look, here's where we're at, right? And that was kind of something that's always stuck in the back of my head, is to say carriers should want to focus on where they are good at and not focus on where they aren't good at. We had a really great conversation with someone from the actuarial team from a Fortune 100 insurance company a couple months back. And they were saying, their sales teams often misunderstand where the profitability is. The sales often is looking at the highest premium, but not understanding where the highest margin is. And so this individual from the actuarial side of the insurance company would say, we wish there was a solution that could balance those two factors. We know sales wants to close high premium deals, but for the overall health of the insurance company, we wish that they wouldn't just chase the highest premium. Sometimes those highest premium deals are the sexy ones that everyone chases, which means everyone's margin gets beat up because they go back for concession after concession after concession. And so what we're starting to do is benchmarking by industry and by rate and by benefit plan design, all of these factors, so that carriers will be able to make informed decisions both on a sales side and from an actuarial side as to what business they truly want to go after. And so what we're hoping is that transparency will actually make them all more profitable. It will allow them to specialize. It will allow them to not waste their time on deals that they don't have a good chance of winning, or if they do win it, their margins are going to be so compressed it won't be profitable business for them. So we generally, when you fight transparency and you fight technology, normally people lose. So yes, we have met some resistance where some companies are saying, no, we don't necessarily want to be benchmarked against everybody else. For the most part, those have not been the bigger companies. So we've been able to kind of just be like, okay, fine. We'll just put you to the side for right now, and we'll come back to this situation when you realize you're going to miss out if you're not part of this, Monark platform. But for the most part, the company's been, if you get up high enough level conversations with them, they understand what we're working on, and they understand that transparency will help them do better in their business. But yeah, there have been a handful of smaller carriers that have said, absolutely not. We would never put our rates publicly up against other carriers' rates. And, that's private proprietary information. I'm like, well, one of the things that I have done in previously, I don't do this now. So if any insurance carrier is listening, don't worry, I'm not doing this to you today. But in the past, we had a carrier that absolutely would not release their rates to us. And so what I did was I submitted 10 different groups with 10 different census files. And I was able to recreate their shelf rate products off of the quotes they gave me. And I just asked for quotes across a variety of their products. And then I just held onto those rates and I reran those same census files every quarter so I could get their updated rate tables. So that saved me, a week of time going back and forth getting quotes. And I was like, you guys could save me a lot of hassle if you just give me the files you use to generate that quote. So we don't have to do this back and forth, dog and pony show here. So there's always a way to do it. But yeah, some carriers have been resistant. They view it as proprietary information. I might be speaking out of turn and there might be a logistical or legal reason for that. But generally speaking, I think when we have really good high level conversations with the carriers, both on an actuarial side, on a high level sales side, they want their agents targeting profitable, effective business, not chasing every single thing with a pulse. I think ultimately that's what we're trying to build in the platform, is a way for them to make smarter decisions as to what business they should be pursuing.
It's so interesting, that sort of lack of transparency. There was the article this week that came through Sifted. I'm not sure. I can't remember who wrote it, and I apologise. I've referenced it twice now, and I still haven't said it was about. It was a call out to startups trying to raise money and insisting on everyone signs an NDA, and essentially they were like, stop getting us to sign NDAs. We're not going to steal your idea. And essentially, sort of overriding sentiment was that the more people were like insistent on the NDA, the less of an actual USP was in this idea. Like it wasn't unique. And in my world, in the recruitment world, it's like, we do get this. It's an awkward scenario, and I know in certain states in the US, it's in 17 states in the US, it's illegal to ask someone what they earn. We still have clients that insist on knowing. In the UK, we don't have that restriction. We have loads of clients that insist on knowing. And to be honest, most people don't resist that. And the people that do, anyone that resists it really hard, everyone in recruitment knows this. If they're listening, that means that person considers themselves underpaid. It's always the same way. It's like it's just the rule of thumb, right? It's just what it means. So essentially, what I'm saying is that resistance to transparency only ever means one thing: that like
you're not competitive, and
you're
you don't
not
want
competitive.
people to know it.
Yeah. And actually, the irony is, you're telling us you're not competitive because you won't share that information. So
that's pretty much exactly what we've seen. I compare it to like someone who posts a TV for $1,000 on Facebook Marketplace for sale used, and someone immediately goes and Googles it and says that TV is $599 brand new at Best Buy, and I can get it with a 2-year warranty. Right. It's like when you have that transparency, you're like, oh shoot, I guess the market is this, right? You're not going to get away with price gouging and overpricing product that's inferior, right? So so we just think that this is long overdue to come to the benefits world. And those benchmarking reports that you see from MetLife and a lot of the other carriers, those are great. Those have been like the Bible for years because we haven't had a lot of this other information. But how great would it be as a broker, at the moment you go to run a quote, you can benchmark that industry code, right? You're running a quote for a law firm, you can immediately see what other, 20 other quotes run that week for law firms in Southern California of similar group sizes have been selecting as their benefits pools, right? So now when you're on the talent acquisition side of things, you can talk about like trying to pull someone across. You can say, hey, this company's benefits actually benchmark 8% above the industry norm, or whatever the case is, right? Now you can actually start leveraging that into very intelligent business decisions from the employer's perspective. The broker can come in and be more effective on winning the business, to bring that client over to their firm and making sure that they're presenting a compelling benefits package compared to what's out there in the industry or based on what the business needs are. And the carriers being selected are the right ones for the job. They're the ones that are naturally going to be winning in those industries and those group sizes and those product lines. So overall, we just view it as, it's happened in almost every other industry. We view it as long overdue for insurance and specifically employee benefits to create that additional layer of transparency.
Yeah, I completely agree. What else do you think, how else do you need to, how else have you chosen to set this up to kind of run an effective marketplace solution? What goes into running an effective marketplace?
Yes, so it's kind of a borderline cringy buzzword, but the flywheel effect, right? It's probably the number one thing that I obsess over and constantly thinking of is what's in it for each party involved, right? And so it's very difficult to create a two-sided marketplace. It's even more difficult to create a three-sided marketplace because of the natural supply and demand pieces there. So what we've chosen to really focus on is to say, who has the biggest problem we can immediately solve for in the easiest, in shortest amount of time, right? And we really honed in on the broker experience. And we said, look, insurance carriers have all this money and all these resources. Employers don't really know what's going on behind the scenes to run all these quotes, but brokers, like also from firsthand experience, I know how many hours it takes of back and forth and how many weeks before we even present a quote to an employer it took us to generate and follow up with all these carriers and get all this information. I said, if we can, even take 8 hours per quote off of someone's plate to get it ready to present to their client, and we can present it in a fashion that makes them look better and more professional and that they really have their stuff together, that's solving a need for the broker, right? So that's one of the reasons we said, step one, let's just create a better quoting engine experience that saves time for brokers. Let's get brokers onto our system, help them solve an immediate problem. Then they're sharing that information with their client. As the client is choosing those plans, we're now able to collect that analytics back as to what's actually being moved forward in the selection process. That then gives us the data we needed to go and create a compelling story over to carriers to say, hey, now we've got all this employer information in our system. This is going to help your sales teams really target the correct groups of people and the correct brokerages that have access to the books of business that you're looking for. So we knew the three parties involved that we wanted to solve for, but we had to kind of map out how do we get to each stage of that. And sometimes it means that the first phase of the product is free, and then you do a freemium model with a buy up, and so we've had to think a lot about pricing strategy and where the price sensitivities are, and trying to get an employer to pay to receive a quote from their broker is probably non-existent, right? So we had to say, okay, the employer experience is probably going to be free, but we could also see it down the road where potentially the employer could host their own auction to have brokers bid on the product, right? And then brokers could use the same kinds of analytic tools that we're providing for insurance carriers to figure out which clients they're going to be best suited for, and then they can actively bid on those projects. So we could see it eventually opening up, but on the employer piece as well, but we're really focused on the broker experience and then how that broker is interacting with the carrier, because we saw that as the largest amount of time delay, and that was the biggest part of the marketplace problem that we saw to solve for. So so it really just comes down to how do you make everybody happier? How do you improve their experience on their day-to-day workflow? I use Bloomberg Terminal as a great example on the finance side of things, right? There's a reason, I don't know what the stat is, but my guess is probably high 80s, low 90% of finance pros are working off that system, and it costs $24,000 a year for a license to it. But that's where all the communication, that's where all the interaction, the negotiation is happening, right? And it's happening fast because everyone's there. And so that's kind of what we're trying to create here with Monark, is to say, why doesn't something like that exist on the insurance side, where we've got transparency, we've got everybody inside the same system, and they can all interact with each other, and it drives value. If you ask, an insurance broker to pay $24,000 a year for a quoting system right now, they would laugh you out of the room, right?
Yep.
But if you could say, look, this $24,000 a year is going to save you, 40% of your workload, all of a sudden you talk to a broker that's kind of up and coming, and they've onboarded a lot of clients, and now they're really struggling to kind of keep up, and they've got to hire more people. And you can say, hey, look, we're going to shave off this much of your day-to-day workload. All of a sudden that number starts sounding actually pretty affordable and pretty cheap. And you can make a business around that. I'm not saying we're trying to price Monark at $24,000 a year. We're trying to come in very aggressive. It'll take us years to kind of build up the kind of functionality that Bloomberg has. But that's kind of the higher level idea of what we're trying to create with this flywheel effect of, like, how do you add value to each side of that marketplace? So no, I totally understand that. You've got to prove the use case to the point where it saves enough time and enough money that it's worth the investment. And it's just about efficiencies most of the time with these things. And I won't. I was going to jump into my own SaaS woes, but I'll talk to you about that another time. One of the things we bonded over, and I was really interested about, is that you've self-funded off the back of the profits of your brokerage businesses, and I love talking about bootstrapping versus raising pre-seed money. Why did you choose that route? Did you consider going out and raising money ahead of time, or what was your thinking there? So we've actually got a list of about 50 friends and family, about 20 angel funds that have expressed interest in wanting to give us money. We've had a lot of early conversations with VCs, and we've taken those conversations and taken them seriously, but also we've taken them seriously, but without a sense of urgency, because we knew we could afford to fund ourselves to get us to where we wanted. So I've been in a VC back, 2 different prior VC backed companies, both of which have gone public. So I've seen what that kind of explosive growth can look like. You know, I'm a 3-time bootstrapped founder as well, so I've seen what the control of being bootstrapped looks like. And I think with Monark, I didn't. We do want that lightning fast acceleration in the growth of the company, and so I do think bringing non-institutional investment does make a lot of sense to us. But I'm also, because I've bootstrapped, I understand innately how valuable a single dollar is. And so part of this was, I didn't, you know, even though I firmly believe in the product to the point of putting my own money into it, going out and getting my family to put money into it. I've actually had a couple of them actually get annoyed with me. And as I said, look, we feel like you're holding out and you're not letting us invest. And I said that, okay, that's a good sign. Like, they actually want in. I'm not asking. They're like, hey, take my money. I'm like, no, I don't want to, you know, we're still working out the kinks on the product market fit here. And once we get traction, and they're like, yeah, we know, but once we know you'll get traction, and once you get it, you're going to be worth more. And we want in earlier. I said, great, good to have these conversations. But as soon as you take a dollar of someone else's money, you now have a boss you are responsible for reporting to. And that in and of itself doesn't scare me at all. What scares me is the pulling the attention away from the day-to-day operations of moving the business forward. And suddenly now having that one extra responsibility at this size of a business and at this early stage, suddenly now being responsible for, you know, creating, you know, again, all in the interest of transparency, creating that financial transparency with where our investor dollars are going, and focusing more and more of my time on raising that next fund, on making sure that we are, you know, communicating with all of our investors and everything else. I saw that as a detraction from early on getting as much traction as we could on the actual product development. And so, you know, for the typical friends and family angel rounds, I said, I can put my own cash in. I believe in the product. I believe in where we're going. Let's not deal with the outside distraction. Let's just get going on this. So that was really kind of the major driver on that. It wasn't necessarily to be risk adverse. In fact, if anything, my wife will tell you I definitely am not risk adverse. Yeah, that was kind of the thought process there on bootstrapping, was that it allowed us to really focus on where we believe the product should go, iron out the product market fit, avoid taking too early dilution on the product to get it to a healthier, stronger, defensible business position, and then go out when we're ready to truly pour gasoline on the business. And we're getting pretty close to that point here in the next like 2 or 3 months. Where we're at that stage now where we're like, okay, now it's time to go. Now let's go get the money. Now we need the additional, you know, muscle power. Let's really turn this thing into a rocket ship. But we wanted to make sure we had a nice solid foundation before we went and risked other people's capital.
Yeah. I mean, it sings to my own tune. Yeah. I mean, I think that, I mean, I'm saying this in a position of, you know, I've been able to do it because I've started businesses that haven't needed a lot of money, and I appreciate that some people, when they've got an InsurTech, inherently probably needs quite a lot of capital, because, you know, you have to get engineers or engineering talent in to sort of build things, so that's challenging. But, you know, I think in an ideal world, everyone would bootstrap to a certain point, and if I was an investor, I'd probably want someone to bootstrap for as long as possible, because I was like, they put their own money in, they believe in their own business, like they're really committed, because you can see they're financially committed. And then from your perspective, from the entrepreneur's perspective, you're going to get a better deal. Like you're going to have to get a better deal. So no, I absolutely believe in it. But
we also really wanted to kind of show off how capital efficient we could be. Our entire first year in business, our entire burn was $700. And that included all of our incorporation, all of our legal, all of our accounting, and, you know, and I've had people say, like, how on earth did you put that together for $700? And it's like, well, okay, you've got a technical co-founder who can bang out a lot of the code pretty efficiently to get that MVP product up and running. But we reached out to, you know, one of the big local law schools that had an entrepreneurship law program, and basically just asked them point blank. You know, we looked up who the professor was. They were a managing partner at a big firm that specialized in tech law and tech startups. And we said, you know, you've got this entrepreneur law program. Your students are probably looking for ways to get real world experience before they graduate and get out in the world and help other entrepreneurs or be part of startups and things like that. Would you be interested in helping us, draft all of our articles of incorporation in Delaware and file our California paperwork and everything else? And they said, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. So we had the professor, who's a named managing partner of this other big firm, sign off on everything. We know it's all legit, but he basically used it as a class exercise to give a real world example of here's how you create the formations of a technology startup and how you do their stock options agreements and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were able to save ourselves thousands of dollars by those kinds of relationships being created. There's a lot of software that we knew we needed access to manage our client relations and sales and things like that. A lot of them, if you can show, hey, this is what we're on track to do, and we've got a background in this, or we, here's the business model around it. We had a lot of software companies give us 6 months free access to their fully loaded enterprise systems because they know there's a big cost of switching down the road. And so they figured if they could get us hooked on the platform for the first 6 months, 6 months later, we wouldn't move and go anywhere else. So they viewed it as just an early stage marketing piece. So yeah, our entire first year in business, we weren't cutting corners. We were just dramatically cutting expenses by leveraging a lot of this kind of goodwill out there. And we're very proud of that. We wanted to show that off and say, look, you give us money, we're not going to go out and just rent a beautiful office and give everyone the best snacks possible. We're going to be very capital efficient to hit the business objectives with every dollar that we do bring on. But we wanted to prove that out and say, look, here's what we've done so far, being very capital efficient. Give us your capital and imagine what we can do to 10x or 100x this thing. So.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's so my journey as well, because the first business I ran in the recruitment space, I got really over the top. We had amazing offices and football table, and we had dartboard, and we had a breakout area, and we had like an Xbox. And this time, it's like, I'm not saying we're not running Spartan, but I've invested in so much kind of tech that leads towards the business use case. So there isn't a piece of recruitment technology I don't think that my team don't own if it makes their job better. And it's like, I'll invest in that and not in that. And it's just a learned experience. So I think that's great when people have run businesses. One last thing that I wanted to ask you, there's the benefit space inside out, outside of your own business. Is there any sort of specific innovations that have really caught your eye?
I'd say the single biggest thing in the last few years has really been a willingness with carriers to move EDI connectivity down market. Mm-hmm. So typically that was only something for large employers where you're on the big ADP platforms or things like that, and you're moving employees through their payroll onboarding, through benefits, and then their benefits just magically turn on with the insurance carrier 48 hours later. Mm-hmm. We're seeing more and more platforms coming out with those EDI connectivity options, even for smaller carriers. We're seeing more carriers pushing out that they can create that connectivity. So from the benefits perspective, I'd say that's probably the single greatest innovation that we've seen on a brokerage side of things, because prior to that, you're collecting an application, and there were pieces of software out there that could map someone's information into an application and collect an e-signature. You would still have to download that PDF, securely send it to the insurance carrier, check back in with the insurance carrier 48 hours later, make sure they actually did in fact receive it. They say, yes, we received it. You follow back up a week later to make sure they actually did something with it now that they've acknowledged they received it. And then you communicate that information back to the employee. So we had a full-time person literally just processing those things, an entire 8 hours a day, just sending them off, following back up, and just running those reports. And we've been able to, 5x the size of our business without hiring another one of those people. And the reason we've been able to do that is because as we keep growing the business, we keep finding more and more carriers willing to accept those automatic connections, which means we don't have to keep hiring more human beings to process all those manual transactions. And so that's probably been the single largest improvement in efficiency that I've seen on a brokerage side of things. It's really been on the benefits administration, benefits implementation. And then so that was kind of, given how much of an impact that had on our brokerage, that was also, again, going back to why did we want to create Monark? Because we felt that same kind of pleasure that could be acquired by streamlining the backside could be also achieved on the front side, and the implementation, the underwriting, the quoting process, all of that could move faster as well. So, besides that, I think there's been a lot of product innovation, as, especially with the pandemic, there's been a lot of, there were a lot of products out there that were kind of fringe benefits, and, you've got some companies with some extremely rich programs where they just try to check every single possible box, and you've got like parental leave programs and things like that. We've seen a huge rise in insuring parental leave for fathers, mothers going out on that. We've seen a lot of like evolution in the perks programs and reimbursement for things. Before, you used to like provide gym memberships or things like that, and very early on we reached out for discounts for clients on everything from like dog walking to laundry service to meal delivery and things like that. And pre-pandemic, that was very much like, oh, those guys are crazy. They're just trying to recreate the Google cafeteria. And I'm like, yeah, pretty much. But we're trying to bring that to smaller companies. Since the pandemic, companies are like, yeah, no, we need to do that because we recognize that people's home lives are being now impacted because they're never leaving their home office. And so what can we do to make their home life a little easier, whether it's childcare or dog walking services or meal delivery and things like that. So we've seen a lot of evolution on the benefit side as to what used to be really nice, like at the very, very top level of the spectrum of benefits being offered, now kind of coming down market to being much more commonplace benefits for employers to look at improving their employee experience. So.
Yeah, it's interesting on the benefit side. Like, I think even a business as small as mine, like 4 people, is just, you have to start thinking about it. I was thinking about it today, and that can only be a good thing. But no, David, I'm really conscious of our time. We don't want to overstay our welcome with our podcast listeners. So I think it's a really good place to end it. I'm super excited we got to do this one because I really believe in marketplace solutions. I think transparency is like massively important to everything we do in insurance, and I think you guys are sort of providing a really good platform for that to kind of percolate throughout the benefits industry, which has not been jumping to the fore to be transparent. So thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate you being a guest. But always want to give this sort of opportunity to, you're going through that kind of raising process. If people wanted to reach out to you, where's the best place to sort of get hold of you? LinkedIn? Email, whatever.
I'm an avid user on LinkedIn. Definitely find me there, David Bryant, and look up MonarkHQ, and that's MONARK HQ, or just David.Bryant at MonarkHQ will do the job as well, and get in touch with me. And happy to communicate. And MonarkHQ should be launching in all 50 states by the end of Q3 for our bidding platform. So really excited for that coming up.
Amazing stuff. Brilliant. David, thank you once again. Thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast. I really appreciate your time.
Great. Thanks so much. Take care.
Thanks, pal. Bye.